Good morning and welcome. My name is Rachel Myung, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Law and Society. It goes without saying that we are deeply grateful for your company. We are deeply grateful to Professor Littlejohn, to Judge Keith, to Professor Hammer for allowing us to have the symposium to honor Professor Littlejohn's work and his legacy. The Journal of Law and Society is one of two publications here at Wayne Law, and just like a traditional law review, we check every fact asserted in the article submitted to us. We also read every line in the Blue Book, and our students make sure that my favorite italicized and non-italicized commas are appropriate in every citation. With that said, our publication is very unique in that we have a special particular focus on social justice. What we hope to provide is a scholarly forum in which the community can ask questions, challenge the status quo, and hopefully we can learn something together. With that said, I would like to note that we have our journal available outside. You can purchase the yearly subscription for $25, and this year's edition will highlight the Detroit bankruptcy, as well as 17.2, which would be a tribute to Professor Littlejohn. So you can either purchase the year for $25 or Professor Littlejohn's tribute issue for $15. So if you'd like, please see us out in the hall. But without further ado, I would like to honor and introduce Professor Peter J. Hammer, our faculty advisor. Without him, I'm not sure where we would be. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. Looking out at this audience, and seeing so many of my heroes here is a real privilege. But I know why you're here, and it's certainly not because of me. It's because of the deep well of affection that people have for Professor Littlejohn, and that's deeply shared by myself. This has been on my bucket list for a while. Not every person who's a trailblazer gets honored in their time. And I think all the things that Professor Littlejohn has done over his career need to be raised up and elevated in our time for our generation, and that he received the honor and distinction he deserves for his accomplishments. And about a year ago, we started corresponding about some new publications, right, still productive, and where they might be placed. And I was lobbying very hard that the best placement symbolically and substantively for his new work would be the Journal of Law and Society. And that was the genesis of putting together what will be a tribute volume, publishing some new work from Professor Littlejohn, and then soliciting tributes from people to talk about the breadth and scope and depth of his careers and accomplishments. The thought that came after that was, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had the symposium to go along with the tribute issue, right? So we sort of have a two-package volume here, one a tribute issue in the volume, the other the day that we are going to be enjoying. Before talking a little bit about the structure of the day, which is really structured off of Littlejohn's accomplishments and nature of substance of his work, let me again thank Rachel, our Journal of Law and Society editor-in-chief, who's done a wonderful job putting this together. Is Sean Rydell here? Got to wave, Sean. He's probably still working. Sean is the student who is in charge, working behind the scenes as well as in front of the scenes, to make sure the symposium came together, right, which is really a full-time job. But Sean is the person that contacted everybody, arranged the panels, organized the logistics, and he needs distinction as well. If you read the Journal of Law and Society under the big print, you see Wayne State University Law School in partnership with the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. So we've created this interesting synergy where the journal becomes kind of the scholarly arm of the Keith Center and allows us to make contributions in the literature that go far beyond the city of Detroit and start to impact the nation. And the Beyond Bankruptcy volume, which is out there and is just really hot off the press, they worked hard to make sure it could be published and available in time for our symposium, reflects a conference we had about a year ago looking at the implications of bankruptcy in Detroit and other financially distressed cities. And that's the type of work that we're trying to do here at the center. That's the type of work we're trying to do here with the Journal of Law and Society to have an impact that's carrying on the legacy of the law school, carrying on the legacy of Judge Keith, and carrying on the legacy of Professor Littlejohn. Sadly, when I started law school, Professor Littlejohn already had emeritus status, so we were never able to serve on the faculty together. But it wasn't long in terms of my tenure here that I started to learn about his legacy. First was the Keith Collection of African American Legal History, who was being directed by Erica Jackson at that time when I started, and learning about the depth of his commitment and the struggles involved in putting that collection together. Then knowledge of the Marching Towards Justice exhibit, which was one of the primary accomplishments of the Keith Collection. Then, when sadly Dean Miller passed unexpectedly and tragically, I took over the Teaching Law in High School program and shepherded that to its new champion, Professor Justin Long, and learned that his fingerprints were over that as well. So almost every significant thing that I ran into here at the law school that was resonating with me and my work, I found was really started and had its genesis with Professor Littlejohn. In structuring the symposium today, we've tried to take each panel and have each panel reflect some substantive body of Professor Littlejohn's work, but also to serve as a bridge from history to today. Right? That sort of challenge between what we've done historically and what does it mean today. And each one of these issues resonate today. So the first issue is really trying to honor his work as one of the leading historians of African American legal history. Right? In particular, the focus in Michigan. Nobody knows more about African American legal history in Michigan than Ed Littlejohn. So we have a panel of distinguished lawyers and judges, right? And their charge in some respects is to sort of honor that legacy, but also challenge us collectively as law students, as law faculty, as lawyers, as judges, to saying, how are we going to implement that legacy today? Right? How do we connect the dots and make sure the history and the amazing history got started is carried on, is just as impactful today as it was in the past? The second panel tees up the issue of diversity in legal education. Right? And I can imagine the struggles that you had as a faculty member, as trying to integrate the school and champion affirmative action, 1970s, 1980s, right? Sadly, right, we're not making the progress we need. And in many respects, we're probably regressing. And it's important that institutions be honest about what they do well, right? But also be honest about what they're not doing well. And no university in Michigan, including Wayne State University, is making significant progress in affirmative action. Right? If we don't have diversity in law school, I will guarantee you the consequence of that, there will be no more diversity in the profession. Right? So this is so critical, not just today, but for the future generations in order to impact this. And we have 5 first-year law students of African American origins. Right? And that's shameful, and we should own that shame, and we should use that for motivation. So the second panel that we have is going to challenge us historically. What were the fights over affirmative action historically, and what does that mean today, and how can we take action into the future? The final, and this again I sort of keep running into surprises, I sort of start reading his work, is the contribution that Ed Littlejohn made in terms of police commissions and police community relations. Right? His advocacy and some of his earlier scholarship was arguing to have greater community involvement and oversight of police. A lot of his work was used in justifying and then implementing the police commission, and then Professor Littlejohn served on the police commission in its origins and early stages. So the last panel today will continue that notion of police-community relationships historically, right? And sadly, just like affirmative action, we have a lot of progress that we still need to be doing today. I could say safely that if there was no Ed Littlejohn, there would be no Keith Collection of African American Legal History. Right? And I can say further, if there was no Keith Collection of African American Legal History, it is doubtful that we would have the Keith Center for Civil Rights that we have today. It's a continuous legacy, and he really needs the honor. And I would actually sort of applaud that I couldn't have this position today if he was not serving in his former capacity. But as somebody who likes logic, right, there's another sort of syllogism in there, right? Without Judge Keith, there would be no Keith Collection of African American Legal History. Without Judge Keith, there would be no Keith Center for Civil Rights. So it's my honor now to introduce Judge Keith, who will say some opening remarks for the symposium in tribute to Ed Littlejohn. Any lawyer in the United States who knows anything about civil rights knows Judge Keith. It's unavoidable. Right? His legacy and his contribution to civil rights and civil liberties jurisprudence has changed the nation permanently and for the good. Anybody who has casual contact with Judge Keith knows what a great man he is and what a great humanitarian he is. Every time I interact with him, I leave not only inspired by his example, but really challenged individually to be a better person myself. right? And I don't think I'm alone. I think everybody that comes into a circle aspires to be a better person given the example he does, and that's just with casual contact. One of the great honors I had was to be part of the team that was putting together Judge Keith's biography, Crusader for Justice, right? And there's a display volume outside, and we've got postcards that can tell you quickly how you can purchase the book. But when you actually are involved and delve deeply into his life, the awe actually increases, if you can believe it, right? There is no decade, right, in the judge's life where he was not doing something significant, something impactful. And more than just the case law, what you start to learn is that relationships matter to Judge Keith, right? And building relationships, loyalty in relationships. And he'll be the first to tell you that it was his father and his mother that were the primary inspirations for him, right? And so Perry and Ann Keith become critical in understanding who Judge Keith is. And Judge Keith will say the greatest man he ever knew, right, was his father. And that relationship is critical. What's fascinating about the biography is it's also a love story, right? Because you can't know Judge Keith without knowing his wife and the deep love that he had for Dr. Rachel Boone Keith and how important that is. And that love carries through to his children, and that love carries through to his grandchildren. So the biography is not just a case study in law. It's not just a case study in the history of the civil rights movement, in the history of Detroit. It is really a love story and a story about deep relationships that have created such a wonderful man and such a wonderful legacy. I'm very proud of the biography, but I'm also very proud to introduce you to a new documentary. All right? Many of you had the chance to see this premiere in June at the Fox Theater. It will next be shown in Memphis at the Martin Luther King Museum, and it will be shown in May at the Thurgood Marshall Center in D.C., specially called for by members of the federal judiciary. Right? And so what I'm going to do, I can't think of a better way to introduce the judge than to dim the lights, if we could, and to show you a short 3-minute preview of the documentary, after which I'll return to the podium and invite Judge Keith to say his opening remarks.
My favorite verse from Dr. Martin Luther King is that cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it popular? Vanity asks the question, is it politic? But there comes a time in all of our lives when you cannot do that which is safe or politic or popular. You have to do it because it's the right thing to do.
You know, there's a phrase in writing sometimes when you stumble upon an almost unbelievable story. It's the greatest story you never heard. And in some ways, Judge Damon Keith is the greatest judge you never heard of. The 60s are always hailed as the time when there was a revolution over civil rights, but the legal revolution really didn't take place until the 70s.
Most federal judges can sit on the bench their entire tenure and not have a critical case. So the thought that one judge, African-American judge, appointed in the Eastern District of Michigan, would have landmark case after landmark case, challenge after challenge, nobody could have predicted.
Judge Damon Keith today ruled that the city of Hamtramck, Michigan, forced Negroes out of town.
Rezoning. That's what they called it. We called it removing.
The court-ordered busing has been carried out to the accompaniment of protest and violence.
Keith, he took the heat for it.
And by God, we've just begun to fight!
How many are going to keep their children home? It's not integration, it's communism!
He wanted to take the Constitution and try to apply it to the circumstances of this century.
The federal government said we can listen in on people's conversations, and Judge Keith at the court said, no, you can't.
One little black district court judge in the early 70s standing up to the federal government.
I would imagine that there were advisors to the judge would be saying, play safe. Judge Keith has never played it safe.
He was born in 1922. He's lived through times that people like us can't imagine.
I think he remembers his beginnings. I think he remembers it every day.
Why would you designate a person as being black?
But as the first day of school approaches, a federal judge warned, this case will not be settled in the streets of Pontiac.
And then the battle began.
One person can make a difference if you have the courage and the power to do what is right. Do what is right.
Without further ado, I introduce Damon J. Keith.
Thank you, Peter, for those kind words. Chief Judge Hood, you know he wasn't under oath. I just wanted to let you know all those nice things he said about me. I want to congratulate Wayne State University Journal of Law and Society for this long overdue tribute to my dear friend, Edward J. Littlejohn. I have known him ever since in '67 when I was appointed as a federal district judge. And I don't know how many of you know this, but he finished first, Dennis, in his class at Detroit College of Law. And I was looking for an outstanding law clerk. And I called the dean. I said, Dean, I would like to have Ed Littlejohn to be my law clerk. He says, Damon, you can go to hell. We're not going to let this great scholar leave the Detroit College of Law. And I said, well, I'll just keep him for half a semester. He said, you won't keep him at all. He's going to be at Detroit College of Law. But I tried my best to get Ed. And Ed said, Damon, I'll be happy to be your law clerk. Do you remember that, Ed? But I couldn't get him. And I got him in so many other ways, though. As we sit here today, I want to let you know, as I look at the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights and the Damon J. Keith Law Collection of African American Legal History, neither, Peter, of those two events would have been happening if it had not been for the vision of Ed Littlejohn. I just want to let you know, we can't take this for granted. I remember, Judge Roberson, when Ed Littlejohn called me and said, Damon, I'd like to have lunch with you. And I said, that's great. Then I don't know where we went, Ed, but you picked up the bill, I know that. And I said, okay, we'll have lunch. He says, you know, where there's no vision, the people perish. I would like to establish at the Wayne State University Law School a history of black lawyers and black judges in the United States. I said, that's a big task, Ed. Well, I've checked it out with the number of people, and they said that there's one person who could probably take this up and get the vision that I want in terms of pulling the outstanding black lawyers and judges together in this country. And that's you, Damon. I said, well, I'll take it under advisement. And then I said, Ed, I'll do it. So when you see the Damon J. Keefe Law Collection, and Ed, I don't know if they told you, but its endowment is well over $1 million now. And I don't know if Bob Smith is here. He was here earlier, and he put together, when you go to the Keefe collection, or the center, this beautiful history of the struggle of black folks in America. Just one. And at lunches, sometimes, you know, you just never know what's going to happen. A few years after we had such a great experience with the Damon J. Keefe Law Collection, I was having lunch with my good friend Al Taubman. And he and I, as many of you know, we're very close. And we were at the Detroit Club at that time. And he says, Damon, you've got the Damon J. Keefe Law Collection at Wayne State University. I think we should have a Damon J. Keefe Center for Civil Rights to accompany that. And I'm willing to put up the lead gift of $3 million. I said, what did you say, Al? He said, you heard me. I'll put up $3 million as the lead gift so we can have this Damon J. Center for Civil Rights. So out of that vision of yours, Ed, we have these two together now. And I want to thank you, dear friend, for having the vision and the strength and indeed the courage to do this. I want to say thank you, and let's give him a big hand. Those are personal things. Now, I want to, now, Dean Benson isn't here. She was my former law clerk. But Blanche Bong Cook is here, my former law clerk. She teaches in the law school there. And my present law clerks, Adma Huda and Erica Aiken, will you please raise your hand? So, yeah. And of course, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. My nephew, Terrence Keith, who's a judge in probate court. Now, these are personal things that I wanted to say about our relationship and your contribution here. I just cannot say enough as I look at what has taken place and what your friendship means to me. On a side note, I don't know if many of you know it now, but Professor Littlejohn is a great art collector. And Ed, I don't know the price of your collection, but they tell me it's pretty heavy. And in spite of all of your legal accomplishments, to have that art collection that you had, you have a distinguished career here at Wayne State University for over 20 years. Things didn't always go like you wanted them to go here at Wayne. In fact, you were a little teed off most of the time you were here. That's true. But as a result of your presence here as a professor for over 20 years, you've got to be proud of Wayne State University's law school and its accomplishments now. As I sit down, I want to say that Ed's a lot younger than I am, but he's walking with a cane. And I said, I've got my cane over here, Ed. And he says, yours is a little more fancier than mine. I said, but we all need a little help. Ladies and gentlemen, will you help me in joining and asking our great professor, Edward J. Littlejohn, for his work in race relations and the law from around the country. Thank you.